On my daughter's 6th birthday, my wife called me paranoid in a kitchen we'd half-emptied to pay bills she swore we couldn't cover. I'd asked one thing, where the money went. Cora squeezed my shoulder and grinned at the guests. "He counts every penny." They laughed. I let them. 2 nights later, a stranger knocked after Lila fell asleep. He didn't ask for my wife. He wanted me, alone. He unfolded a paper, pressed it flat on the card table, and pointed. "That your signature?" My name, in cursive. I have never signed in cursive. Not once in my life. I poured his coffee, kept my hands flat so they wouldn't shake. And with every word he said, the woman who called me paranoid turned into someone who'd counted on it. She bet 10 years I'd never check. She should have counted better. I'm Wesley, 33, and I've been the careful one my whole life. The man who reads the fine print. The man who keeps a little back. That night, for the first time, being careful was the only thing between my daughter and the floor. Let me take you back 3 days to the birthday, because that's where I stopped trusting the story I'd been fed. The morning of Lila's party, I sold our dining table. A man in a pickup gave me $200 for it and carried it out the front door while I held it steady so it wouldn't scrape the frame. Solid oak. We'd bought it the year Lila was born. Cora had picked it because it had room to grow into. More chairs, more kids, a whole life we were going to fill it with. I stood in the empty rectangle it left on the floor, sunlight where the table used to be, a clean pale square in the wood grain, everywhere else darkened by 6 years of us. Cora came in with a folding card table from the garage, set it up over the pale square like it had always been there. "It photographs the same," she said. That was the first thing that stopped me. Not the money, the word photographs. Like the point of the table was how it looked to other people. I run a 2-man electrical business. Me and a kid named Theo I'm training. I wire houses, panels, the boring guts of buildings that keep families from burning down in their sleep. I'm good at it because I notice the one wire that's wrong when everything else looks fine. You learn to trust the small thing that doesn't add up. It has saved lives that will never know my name. For 8 months, our small things hadn't added up. The savings account we opened when we married, the one we called the house fund, because Cora wanted a bigger place with a yard before Lila started school, had been thinning. I'd ask. Cora had an answer every time. The furnace. Lila's dental. Her car needed brakes. Groceries. Always groceries. Always more than I remembered. Each answer was a real thing that could cost real money. Each one on its own made sense. I'm an electrician. I don't argue with one bad reading. I argue with a pattern. The pattern was this. Every month, money's tight. Every month, we sold something, or skipped something, or waited on something. And every month, my wife looked more relaxed than I'd seen her in years. People don't relax when they're drowning. They relax when they've decided something. I didn't know what she'd decided, so I did the thing I do on a job when a circuit keeps tripping and nobody can tell me why. That morning, before the guests came, I logged into the house fund to see the raw numbers myself. The balance was $11. Not $1,100, 11. I sat with that for a while, in the empty spot where the table used to be. Then I noticed the folding legs of the card table weren't even. It rocked. I found a matchbook, folded it, wedged it under the short leg, steadied the thing. That's the kind of man I am. The table is falling, and I'm leveling a leg. The guests started arriving at 2. Cora's family fills a room. Her mother, Colleen, who has never once knocked, who lets herself in with a key we didn't give her and a comment about the dishes we didn't wash. Cora's sister, Bridget, who arrives late and leaves early and always looks like she just came from somewhere better than wherever you are. And this year, someone new. A man Bridget introduced as Denny. Big hands, quiet, a little out of place in a room full of people who'd known each other for decades. He shook my hand like he meant it, and then didn't seem to know what to do with himself. I liked him for that. He was the only person there who looked like he was actually seeing the room. Leela had made a banner. She'd spent all week on it, tongue out in concentration, and it hung over the card table now in loops of tape. 3 crayon stick figures under crooked letters. Daddy, Mommy, me. A yellow sun with too many rays. A dog we don't own because she's still hoping. She stood on a chair to point at it. That's us, forever. Forever, I said. I would like to tell you I was fully present for my daughter's birthday. I was doing the thing men like me do, which is smile at the party, while a part of the brain keeps working on the problem in the other room. $11. $11 and a stranger with big hands who kept glancing at Bridget like he was waiting for permission to breathe. The cake came out. We sang. Lila blew out 6 candles and told everyone her wish, which you're not supposed to do, and her wish was that we could stay in this house. The room laughed like it was cute. I watched Cora's face. She didn't laugh. She looked at the counter. After cake in the kitchen, with the water running and half the family in earshot, I asked her the small, quiet question you ask a spouse. The house fund's empty. Can we talk tonight about where it went? She didn't lower her voice. That's the part I keep coming back to. She raised it. Wesley, not today. A little laugh for the aunt drying a plate beside her. He does this. He gets an idea and he can't let it go. She turned to me, warm as anything, and put her hand flat on my chest like she was calming a horse. You're being paranoid, babe. It's a birthday. You're being paranoid. Here's what she didn't know she'd done. When I was 12, my father put everything we had into a sure thing. A man he golfed with, a can't-miss deal, doubles your money by Christmas. My dad wasn't stupid. He was hopeful, which is worse because hope doesn't read contracts. By the next fall, we'd lost the house. I remember the pale squares on the walls where the pictures used to hang. I remember my mother selling her wedding china to a woman who haggled her down at the door. I remember my father saying, over and over, that he'd only been trying to give us more. And I remember my uncles at Thanksgiving that year laughing at how careful my mother had gotten, how she counted everything now, how she'd become paranoid. I built my whole life to never stand in a room like that again. Careful isn't a personality to me. It's a wall I put between the people I love and the floor. So when my wife stood in our half-empty kitchen on our daughter's birthday and used that exact word, I didn't argue. I've learned that the careful thing and the loud thing are rarely the same thing. I smiled. I said, "You're right. It's a birthday." And that night, after everyone left and Lila was asleep under her new blanket, I sat down at the wobbling card table with my laptop and I did the one thing my father never did. I stopped trusting the story. I started pulling the wire to see where it actually went. The house fund didn't just empty. It had been bleeding for 18 months. Steady, deliberate. Transfers going out, most of them the same size, most of them to an account I didn't recognize, tagged with a word I'd never heard my wife say out loud. Abundance. I sat there with my hands flat on the table so they wouldn't shake, and I understood that money's tight had never been a fact. It had been a leash, and I'd worn it for a year and a half, apologizing for asking. If you've ever been made to feel crazy for noticing something real, if someone you trusted ever handed you a word like paranoid to make you put your own eyes down, then you already know the feeling in that kitchen. If you do, take a second to like this video and subscribe, because there are more of us out here than anyone admits, and I want this story to find them. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I read every one. Now let me tell you what I found when I followed the money. The account was Bridget's. Not officially. Nothing my sister-in-law does is official, but the name behind Abundance resolved after an hour to a woman named Bridget who was very good at making sure her name was never quite on anything. Bridget, who drove a leased Range Rover and posted photos of sunsets with captions about mindset. Bridget, who 2 years ago had started something she called a wealth circle for women because, and I'm quoting a caption here, banks are built to keep us small. I know what a circle is. Everyone who's had a certain kind of aunt knows what a circle is. You put money in a spot, and people below you put money in, and the person who put money in first gets paid by the people who come after. And everyone calls it a blessing until there's nobody left below you, and the whole thing folds in on the last people who joined. It has 100 names: blessing loom, gifting circle, abundance. The name changes so the law can't keep up. The shape never changes. The shape is a pyramid, and pyramids are heaviest at the bottom. My wife had put $80-some thousand into the bottom of her sister's pyramid while telling me we couldn't afford our own dining table. I want to be honest about the next part, because it's the part I'm least proud of. I didn't wake her. I didn't storm into our bedroom with the laptop. I sat in the dark kitchen until 3 in the morning, and I let myself feel it. Once. All the way down. The specific horror of watching the exact thing you built your life to prevent happen inside your own house, in your blind spot, wearing your wife's face. I waited for the apology in my head to arrive. Some voice that said, she didn't mean it. She got tricked too. I'm still waiting. Because here's what I couldn't explain away. The transfers didn't look like a woman getting swept up. They looked like a woman keeping a schedule. Same day, each month. Same amount, mostly. The discipline of it. My wife had shown more financial discipline hiding money from me than she'd ever shown building anything with me. She was capable. She'd just aimed it somewhere I wasn't allowed to look. I closed the laptop. I checked on Lila. I stood in her doorway longer than I needed to, the way you do when a kid is the only clean thing left in your hands. Then I went to bed next to my wife and I said nothing. And I lay there planning the way a man plans when the house is already on fire and the children are still inside. Not loud, not fast. In order. Doors first. The next morning, I went to the bank in person before work because a screen only shows you what someone wants you to see, and a paper record shows you the truth. A teller named Dolores printed 18 months of statements while I stood at the counter with my coffee going cold in my hand. Then she paused, scrolled, and said the thing that turned my stomach all the way over. And did you want the statements on the second card too, or just the primary? The second card, I said, keeping my voice easy, the way you ask a homeowner a question when you already suspect the wiring is going to fail inspection. There was a second card on our joint credit account, opened 14 months ago, maxed and paid down, and maxed again in a rhythm I recognize now. The same monthly heartbeat as the house fund transfers. Cash advances, most of them, thousands at a time, pulled at the highest interest a bank is allowed to charge, and fed straight into abundance. My wife hadn't just spent our savings. When the savings ran dry, she'd started borrowing at 19% to keep feeding her sister's circle and paying the minimum with, I traced it, more transfers, robbing one card to feed the pyramid and the pyramid to pay the card, a snake eating its own tail with my family strapped to the middle. The number wasn't 80,000 anymore. With the card, with the interest, it was closer to 110. I thanked Dolores. I did not let my face do anything. I walked to my truck and sat in the parking lot and put both hands on the wheel and squeezed until the shaking stopped. Then I drove to work and I wired a house and I said nothing because the doors weren't in yet. And a man who panics before the doors are in loses everyone inside. I had a lot I didn't know yet. I didn't know about the note. I didn't know about the man with the big hands. I didn't know how far down the money had gone or whose name was going to end up holding the bag when the bottom fell out. I found out 2 nights later at 9 o'clock when someone knocked. Cora was at Bridget's. She'd started spending 3-4 evenings a week there, helping with the kids, and I'd stopped asking because I already knew the answer wasn't kids. I opened the door and it was Denny, rain on his collar, the quiet man from the party, except now he didn't look out of place. He looked like a man who'd driven around the block twice deciding whether to come in. Wesley, I'm sorry to do this at your house. He glanced past me toward the stairs. Is your daughter asleep? Good, good. He nodded too many times. Can I come in? 10 minutes. Then I'll go, whatever you decide. I let him in. I don't know exactly why. Maybe because he'd asked about Lila first. A man who leads with the kid is usually not the kind who's there to take from her. He wouldn't sit until I did. I put 2 coffees on the card table between us, and he wrapped both hands around his like he needed the heat. I'm gonna say it plain, because I've been rehearsing the soft version all day, and it's worse, he breathed out. I gave your family $60,000 in January, and I think you don't know. The furnace clicked on somewhere in the house. I kept my hands flat on the table. Keep going, I said. He unfolded a paper from his jacket, pressed it flat, turned it toward me, slid it across. A promissory note. The kind you can download and fill in, notarized at the bottom by a notary whose name I didn't know. Borrower, Bridget Circle, dressed up with a business name I'd never heard. Guarantor, personally, on the hook if the circle didn't pay. Me, Wesley, my full legal name printed by someone else's understanding of it, and then, on the signature line, my name. In cursive, a looping, confident W, a signature a stranger would believe. I have signed 1,000 documents in my life, permits, inspections, loan papers on my own truck. I print. I've always printed since a teacher in 3rd grade told me my cursive looked like a fence in a storm, and I decided printing was cleaner and never went back. There is not one true signature of mine anywhere on this earth in cursive. I looked at that looping W for a long time. That's not mine, I said. Denny closed his eyes, not surprised. Confirmed. Bridget told me you were in, that you and Cora were guaranteeing it together, that you just didn't want your name out front because of your business. She had the paper already signed when she brought it to me. He rubbed his face. I gave them my daughter's college money, Wesley. I did it because I trusted that a careful guy like you had looked at it and signed off. Was my wife there? I asked. When Bridget showed you the note? Denny hesitated, and the hesitation was the answer before he gave it. Yeah, he said quietly. Cora was there. She didn't say much. She kinda nodded along. When I asked if you'd really read it, she said, Wesley reads everything twice. He looked sick. She said it like a joke, like it was funny that you were so careful. And I laughed, because it made me feel safe. I laughed at the exact thing that was supposed to protect me. I sat with that. My wife had stood in a room and used my carefulness as a punchline to reassure a stranger into handing over his kid's future next to a signature she knew I'd never made. She hadn't held the pen, maybe, but she'd sold the character reference. She'd rented out my whole reputation and let her sister forge the rest. There it was, the word again, but flipped. Bridget had used the exact thing my family mocked me for, careful, as bait. She'd sold my caution to a stranger as proof the deal was safe. My reputation for reading the fine print had guaranteed a loan I'd never seen, for a scheme I'd never heard of, secured by a signature I'd never made. I felt something go very quiet in me, not calm, the opposite of calm, held perfectly still. Denny, I turned this note back around so I didn't have to look at the W. Why are you here? You could have just called the money in. My name's on it. You could ruin me and get paid. He looked at his coffee. Because I've got a kid too, he said. And because 2 weeks ago, Bridget stopped answering the specific questions and started answering different ones. You know that thing people do when they've got no money. They talk about how much money's coming. He shook his head. I recruited 3 guys under me, friends. I told them it was safe because a careful man vouched. If this thing's what I'm scared it is, I didn't just lose my kid's money. I dragged 4 families into a hole because of a signature that isn't even real. The rain filled the silence. I think, Denny said carefully, you and I got played by the same people, and I think you're the only one who might be able to prove the paper's fake before it takes both our families down. Now, I want you to stop for 1 second before I tell you what I did next, and predict it. Because most people, when I tell this story, guess wrong. They think a wronged husband with a forged loan and a lying wife does the loud thing, the confrontation, the scene. Tell me in the comments what you think I did that night at that card table with a stranger and a fake signature between us. Then keep listening, because the answer is the whole reason I still have a daughter who sleeps in that house. Here's what I did. Nothing loud. I made Denny a list. I asked him for every date, every dollar, every name Bridget had used, every account he'd wired to. I asked him to send me a photo of the note and to keep the original somewhere that wasn't his house. I told him not to call the money in yet, not to spook anyone, not to say a word to Bridget or Cora that anything had changed. I told him I needed 9 days. Why 9? He asked. Because that's how long it takes to do this right instead of fast, I said. My father did it fast. I'm not my father. He didn't know what that meant. He nodded anyway, like a man grateful to hand the wheel to someone with steadier hands. After he left, I sat alone with the photo of that looping W until the coffee went cold, and I made myself understand the shape of the trap all the way to the bottom. My wife had drained our savings into her sister's pyramid, when the pyramid needed fresh money to pay the people at the top, which is the only way a pyramid buys itself another month. Bridget had needed a big injection, fast, from someone outside the family, so she'd forged my name as guarantor to make her scheme look backed by a careful, solvent tradesman, and she'd used it to pull 60,000 real dollars out of a real father named Denny. When it collapsed, not if, when, the people holding legal liability would be, in order, Denny, who signed as lender and recruited others, the last members in, and me, whose forged guarantee would be the deepest pocket anyone could sue. My business, my truck, my house, Lila's room. I'd built a wall my whole life to keep my family off the floor, and my wife had quietly cut a door in it and let the flood walk through wearing my signature. The old me, the 12-year-old in the house with the pale squares, wanted to go get her from Bridget's right then. Wanted to put the note on Bridget's kitchen table and watch their faces. But faces aren't evidence. And a scene would only tell them to start deleting, start hiding, start lawyering. The single advantage I had was the one thing my wife had bet against for 18 months. They had no idea I was looking. So I let them keep thinking I was the paranoid husband who counted pennies and could be managed with a hand on his chest. And I went to work. The next morning, I called a lawyer, not a friend of the family, not anyone in our town, a woman 2 counties over named Vivian Sullivan who did fraud and financial abuse and, when I described the note in 90 seconds flat, said only, "Don't confront anyone. Bring me the paper Thursday." And Wesley, start protecting your daughter's accounts today, not tomorrow. That afternoon, I met a forensic document examiner in a strip mall office that smelled like toner, a retired man with a loop and a bank of desk lamps. I showed him the photo of the cursive W and 3 real documents where I'd printed my name. He looked for a long time. Then he said the sentence, "I'll remember when I'm old." A person can forge how you write. They can't forge that you'd never write it that way at all. He could prove it, not just that the signature was suspect, that the entire instinct of the signature was wrong. Cursive from a man who has printed his whole adult life, formed by a hand that pressed too hard in all the places a nervous forger presses. He'd put it in a report. He'd testify. I drove home and did the quiet, unglamorous things. I moved Lila's education savings to an account with only my name and a bank Cora had never touched. I put a fraud alert on my credit. I photographed our documents. I froze what could be frozen and flagged what couldn't. I did in 9 days what my father never did in his life. I put the doors in before the fire reached them. That's when I learned the fire was already licking at the business. On day 5, I was standing in a half-framed house on Marsh Road, running conduit for a builder I'd worked with for 6 years when my phone rang. The builder, his name's Grant, and Grant does not call to chat. "Wesley, my bank flagged the ACH to you." A pause I didn't like. "Fraud alert came back on your business account. They're holding the draw. 15 grand. I got subpayments due Friday, and now I got a note on my screen that says possible fraud. Review required." He wasn't angry. That was worse. Grant was careful too, which is why we worked. "Talk to me, man. Is your account clean?" My apprentice, Theo, 19, good hands, still lives with his mom, was up on the ladder above me, and I watched his face fall as he heard my side of it. Theo's whole paycheck comes out of that draw. Here's the part nobody tells you about a forged note floating out there with your name on it. It doesn't wait politely for court. It poisons the water around your name in real time. My own fraud alert, the one I'd set to protect myself, combined with a promissory note out in the world claiming I'd guaranteed $60,000, had made me look to a bank's software exactly like a man in financial trouble. The wall I'd built to keep my family safe had, for a week, made me radioactive to the people who put food on my apprentice's table. I stood in that half-built house and I made myself breathe. "Grant," I said, "someone forged my signature on a loan I never took. I've got a lawyer and a document examiner on it, and I can send you both their names right now. My account is clean. What you're seeing is me protecting it, and it's ugly for a minute, and I'm sorry it landed on your draw." I looked up at Theo. "Nobody on my crew misses a check. If the draw's held Friday, I'll cover Theo out of my own pocket Monday and eat it. That's not on you, and it's not on him." Grant was quiet. Then, "You know what? That's the most a guy's ever told me on a fraud call. Usually they get loud." A dry breath. "Send me the names. I'll lean on my bank to release it clean. And Wesley, whoever did this to you, I hope you bury them in paper." I hung up and stood there in the smell of fresh lumber, and Theo climbed down and didn't say anything, just handed me the next length of conduit, and we went back to work, because sometimes the most honest thing a careful man can do is finish the wiring while his life is on fire. But I understood something new after that call, something that changed the shape of what I had to do. This wasn't only about proving a signature fake anymore. Every day that note lived out in the world, it cost me a builder's trust, an apprentice's rent, my license's good name, the quiet solvency that was the only thing I'd ever had to offer the people I love. I couldn't just defend against it in some courtroom a year from now. I had to kill it in public, at the source, before it took the business down with the marriage. Bridget had made my name a liability. I was going to have to make it true again in front of everyone who'd heard the lie. That Thursday, I drove the paper 2 counties over to Vivian Sullivan's office, and she laid it all out on her table and walked me through what I was actually holding. An affidavit of forgery, she explained, is a sworn statement that a signature attributed to you isn't yours. File it, back it with the examiner's report, and the note stops being a weapon someone can point at me and becomes evidence of a crime someone committed against me. The same piece of paper, flipped. Exactly like she'd said. But understand the order of operations, she told me. You don't want to file quietly and let them settle it in the dark over a year. Not with a scheme this size and a wife this involved. The cleanest thing, the thing that protects the most people and costs you the least, is if the forgery gets exposed in the open, in front of witnesses, ideally with the state already watching. She tapped the note. You can't force that. But if it happens, you're not a man defending himself. You're a victim the room watched, get wronged. Juries, banks, and family all treat those 2 men very differently. I told her about the gala, about Holloway, about the plan that wasn't quite a plan, just a room where the truth might get room to breathe. Vivian looked at me for a moment. You know, most people in your chair want me to make it stop hurting today. You're the first one in a while who understood you have to let it get worse in the right way first. She capped her pen. Bring me whatever happens at that gala. And Wesley, keep protecting your daughter's accounts. Whatever this costs, she doesn't pay it. She doesn't pay it, I agreed. That had been the whole point from the first $11. And every night, I came home and was married to Cora. That was the hardest part. Harder than the note. She'd kiss me hello and ask about my day and complain, softly, that money was tight. She still said it, even now, even to me, the phrase worn smooth as a stone in her mouth. And I would nod and say I knew, babe, I knew, and inside I'd be filing it. Because a woman who is still telling you money's tight, while $11 sits in your fund and $80,000 sits in her sister's pyramid, is not confused. She's committed. On the 3rd night, the water heater died. It went with a bang in the basement, and then the slow, cold spread of 40 gallons finding the floor drain, and I stood down there in the dark with a flashlight, and I did the thing I do, the math. A new heater installed is about $1,400. I had it, barely, in the one account she couldn't see. But I couldn't spend from that account without her noticing the account existed, and there was nothing anywhere else. My whole life, I'd kept us one repair ahead of disaster, and now a broken appliance had me cornered because my own wife had turned our savings into someone else's yacht payment. Cora came halfway down the stairs in her robe. Is it bad? It's the heater. It's done. She sighed like the universe had wronged her. Perfect. Of course. This month of all months. And then, God help me, she said it. Can you ask your mom just to float us till things loosen up? Ask my mom, float us. The woman who sold her wedding china at the door. My wife wanted me to go put my hand out to the one person who'd already survived this exact fire so we could keep the lights on in a house we were bleeding into her sister's circle. I looked up at her on the stairs, and for 1 second the whole truth was right there in my throat. Hot. And I wanted to say it. $11, Cora. A second card, $110,000. I know. Lila's voice floated down from the top of the stairs. Daddy, is there gonna be warm baths? And I put it away. Again. Because you don't blow the house down while the kid's still on the stairs asking about bath water. There's gonna be warm baths, baby, I called up. Daddy's got it. I heated water on the stove that week, a pot at a time, and gave my daughter warm baths, 1 kettle at a time, and told her it was camping. She thought it was the best week of her life. I bought the heater on a card I paid off myself, quietly, and installed it myself on a Sunday while Cora was at Bridget's. And I never asked my mother for a dime. That's the thing about being the careful one. Nobody sees the disasters you swallow. They only see the man who won't loosen up. The break in my calm came on the 4th night, and it came over something small, the way it always does. Lila couldn't sleep. She patted down and found me at the card table with my laptop and my folders, and she climbed into my lap and looked at the screen and asked, "Is that our numbers?" "Yeah, baby." "Are our numbers okay?" I opened my mouth to tell her the careful lie, the one dads tell. And I couldn't. My throat just closed on it. because the honest answer was that her mother had spent her college fund and forged her father's name, and I was sitting up at a broken table at midnight trying to keep the roof over her exact head. I didn't cry in front of her. I did that later, in the truck, in the driveway, where a 6-year-old couldn't see her careful father come apart for 90 seconds over a folding table and a crayon banner that said, "Forever." Then I wiped my face and I went back inside, and I kept counting. Because that's what carefulness is. When you strip the mockery off it, it's just love that showed up early and did the math. On day 6, Cora asked me to come to a circle night. I nearly said no on instinct. Then I understood it was a gift. If I wanted to understand the machine, the exact promises, the exact pressure, the way it turned kitchen table women into recruits, I needed to see it run. So I said yes. And I watched my wife light up like I'd handed her something she'd wanted for a year. Her careful husband, finally curious, finally getting on board. Bridget's house is bigger than ours, least I now knew. Like the Range Rover, like the whole life. 8 women sat in her great room with wine and little plates, and I sat in the back with a beer I didn't drink. And I watched a con artist work a room she loved. It was gentler than I expected, and that's what made it monstrous. Bridget didn't hard sell. She told stories. A woman named Peg who'd doubled her money and finally left a job that treated her like furniture. A single mom who'd made a down payment. She passed around photos. She never once said the word return without smiling like it embarrassed her to even talk about money. This was really about sisterhood, about women refusing to stay small. And then, softly, the ask. Not give me money. Never that, just, "Who's ready to bless the circle this month?" No pressure. The circle blesses back. I watched Colleen write a check at her own daughter's coffee table. I watched a young woman I didn't know, nervous, knew someone's daughter-in-law, hover her pen and look around the room for permission and find 8 smiling faces giving it, and sign. That's the part I couldn't unsee. It wasn't greed in that room. It was hope. The same hope that read my father a contract he didn't understand. Bridget wasn't selling riches. She was selling the feeling of finally being the smart one, the brave one, the one who didn't stay poor. And it costs everything, because hope doesn't read the fine print. Then Bridget sat down next to me, close, and turned the whole warm machine on me. "So," she said, quiet, just us. "Cora says you've been asking questions about money." My pulse went up. I kept my face where it was. "I ask questions about everything. It's a job hazard." She studied me. "You know what your problem is, Wesley. You think caution is the same as wisdom. It isn't. Caution is just fear wearing a nice shirt." She smiled, almost fond. "I've watched you count for 10 years, watched you make my sister ask for grocery money like a child. You want to protect her, but you're the thing she needs protecting from. A careful man is a small cage, and Cora's been rattling it for years, and you never even heard her. I'll tell you the truth. For 1 second it worked. That's how good she was. For 1 second the 12-year-old in me heard careful and small and cage and wondered if the whole story I'd told about myself, the wall, the love, the math, was just fear in a nice shirt. For 1 second I almost defended myself, almost pulled out everything I knew right there to prove I wasn't small. That would have ended it. One outburst in Bridget's great room and she'd have known I was looking. And the deleting and the lawyering and the hiding would have started that night. So I did the hardest thing I did in the whole 9 days. I let her win the conversation. "Maybe you're right," I said and let my eyes drop. "Maybe I hold on too tight." Bridget patted my knee like I was a dog who'd finally sat. "There he is," she said. "Come to the gala. Bring an open mind. And Wesley," she stood, "bring your mother. She's exactly the kind of woman the circle was built for." I drove home with my hand steady on the wheel and my stomach in knots because I'd just heard from her own mouth that my mother was the target, and I'd had to smile at it. Some victories feel exactly like defeats until you're far enough away to tell them apart. 2 nights later, Cora tried to get my signature. She did it beautifully. She waited until I'd had a beer, until Lila was down, until I was tired on the couch, and she came in with a folder and a pen and that soft voice. "Just a formality," she said, sliding it onto my lap. "Bridget needs household members on file. It's a beneficiary thing, so if anything happened, the circle's payouts would come to us, to Lila. It protects her." She held out the pen. "Sign at the bottom, babe. It's really for her." I looked down at the form. It was junk, of course, a homemade document with the abundance letterhead and a signature line. But I understood, holding it, that I was looking at the birth of the forgery. This was how it was supposed to work. She'd get my real signature on a beneficiary form, and Bridget would have a specimen, and my name would migrate quietly onto whatever paper the circle needed a solvent man behind. They'd tried to do it honestly first. Well, their version of honestly. If I signed, I handed them the one thing they still didn't have, a genuine sample of the name they'd already forged. If I refused too hard, Cora would know something had shifted in me. So I did the careful thing. I picked up the pen, and I clicked it, and I set it down. "I'm not signing anything about money without reading it twice sober," I said, and I made it a joke. "Tired husband, predictable Wesley. You know me. It's a job hazard. Leave it on the counter. I'll look tomorrow." Her jaw tightened, just slightly. "It's really not a big deal, Wes. Then it'll survive till morning." I kissed her temple and stood up and stretched like a man who'd already forgotten the folder existed. The form sat on the counter for 2 days. I never signed it. And then it vanished. And I understood exactly where it had gone and what would happen next. They'd stopped waiting for my real signature and decided to build one. Somewhere in that window, Bridget sat down with a version of my name and taught her hand to loop edu I've never once looped in my life. They forged me because I wouldn't sign. That's the whole story of my marriage in one sentence. When Careful wouldn't cooperate, they just decided to counterfeit it. I had my proof coming together. What I didn't have yet was the shape of how it would end, because Cora and Bridget were about to do something that would take the whole thing out of my careful hands and drop it in front of 40 people. It started with my mother-in-law letting herself in. Colleen has a key and a mission, and that week the mission was me. She found me in the garage wiring a sub-panel for a job, and she stood in the doorway with her arms crossed the way she does when she's decided a thing about you and just needs you to sit still while she installs it. "Cora's worried about you," she said. "Is she? You've been distant, secretive." Colleen let the word sit, moving money around behind her back. She checked the education account, Wesley. It's gone from where it was. So Cora had noticed. Good. I'd wondered how long it would take, and now I knew. About a week. I kept my eyes on the panel. "I moved it somewhere safer," I said. "That's true. Safer." Colleen laughed. One hard note. "You know what it looks like? A man quietly pulling money into accounts his wife can't see. It looks like a man planning to leave. It looks like control." She stepped closer. "Bridget says you've always been like this, watching the pennies, making Cora ask. Do you know how small that makes a woman feel, having to justify every dollar to a man who acts like he's the only adult in the house?" I set down the screwdriver. I looked at my wife's mother, and I understood that this was the story now. Not Cora hid $80,000. The story was going to be, Wesley is a controlling husband who hides money and makes his wife feel small. They'd taken the shape of what Cora had done to me, turned it inside out, and hung it on me like a coat. It was clever. I'll give them that. When you're financially abusing someone, the fastest way to bury it is to accuse them of it first. "Colleen," I said, "has Bridget asked you for money yet?" Something flickered across her face, just a flicker. "That's none of your business." "How much are you in for?" "It's an investment." Her chin came up. "It's the first time in my life anybody's ever let me build something. And you'd tear it down because you can't stand that Bridget did what you never could. Careful men stay poor, Wesley. Bridget says it, and she's right. The world doesn't reward men who read the fine print. It rewards people with the guts to bet. Careful men stay poor." I heard my uncles at that Thanksgiving. I heard the whole architecture of my childhood in it. The belief that the people who lose everything are brave, and the people who protect what they have are cowards, small, less. It's the exact lie that empties a house. My father had believed it. It cost us the walls. I didn't argue. I said, "Please be careful, Colleen." And I watched her hear the insult in the word that wasn't an insult, and leave. That night, I did the math on a new number. If Colleen was in, then this had already jumped a generation. And if it had reached Colleen, it was reaching for everyone, which meant it was reaching next for the softest target in our whole family. My mother, Eleanor, 66 years old, the woman who sold her wedding china at the door to a stranger who haggled, the woman who taught me to count. She'd rebuilt a life out of nothing after my father's sure thing took the house, and she'd done it dollar by careful dollar, and she had at last a small paid-off condo and a savings account she guarded like a nest. Cora brought it up on the Sunday, casual, drying a glass. "Your mom should come to Bridget's next circle as my guest." A smile. "She's been alone too long. It's really more of a women's thing. Support, community. And honestly, Wes, she could use the return. On her fixed income, I have never in my life wanted to throw something the way I wanted to throw that glass she was drying. They were going to put my mother into the bottom of the pyramid, the one woman on earth who'd already lost everything to a sure thing once. They were going to use me, my wife standing in my kitchen, to walk my own mother back into the exact fire I'd spent 30 years building walls against. I set the feeling down. I picked up the plan. "That's a nice idea," I said. "Let me talk to her." I drove to my mother's condo that afternoon. I hadn't planned to tell her everything, but she took one look at my face across her little kitchen table and said, "Sit down, Wesley, and tell me what she's done." Mothers who've survived a collapse can smell the smoke from a long way off. So I told her, all of it. The $11, the transfers, the note, the cursive W, Denny, the lawyer, the examiner, the 9 days. She listened without one interruption, her hands folded, and when I finished, she was quiet for a while. Then she reached across and put her hand over mine. Her hands are older now. They still count. "You know what your father's mistake really was?" she said. "It wasn't the money. It was that he thought loving us meant swinging big, betting the house to be a hero." She squeezed. "You've spent your whole life afraid you'd turn into him, and instead you turned into the person who'd have stopped him. Do you understand me? Careful isn't what killed this family. Careful is what saved you from it. Don't you dare let them make that word ugly for you." That's the thing they don't tell you about a break moment. Sometimes it isn't the villain that cracks you open. Sometimes it's the one person who names the wound out loud, and it turns out you'd been carrying it for 20 years, just waiting for someone to say it plain. I didn't fall apart. I just sat there while my throat did that closing thing again, and my mother let me. And then she said, "Now, what do you need from me?" What I needed was for her to go to the circle. I know how that sounds. Hear me out. I'd spent 9 days building proof of a forged note, but a forged note only proves a fraud against Denny and me. It doesn't prove the whole thing is a pyramid, doesn't protect Colleen or the softer people, doesn't reach the woman running it. For that, someone with real credibility needed to see the recruitment happen, the promises, the returns, the structure, from the inside, as a witness. And there was one more thing I'd done in those 9 days that I hadn't told Denny about. On day 3, I'd called the state, not the police, the securities division, the people whose entire job is investment schemes dressed up as blessings. I'd handed them dates and account numbers and the word abundance, and a soft-spoken investigator named Holloway had told me they'd had 2 other complaints about Bridget's Circle already from families in the next town, and that they were very interested, and that the thing they needed most was to catch a recruitment pitch making specific promises of return in front of a witness who'd testify. The Circle's biggest night of the year was coming. Bridget called it the Abundance Gala. 40 women in a rented banquet room, new recruits brought as guests, a night built to pull the next layer in and pay out the top layer just enough to keep everyone dreaming. Cora had already asked me to come, to smile, to be the careful, solvent husband whose presence made the whole thing look safe. They wanted me in the room to sell it. I decided to be in the room, just not for them. I met Holloway in a diner off the interstate 2 days before the gala was originally set. He was younger than his phone voice, tired around the eyes, the way people get when their job is watching families lose everything, one clever promise at a time. He ordered coffee and didn't touch it, and read my folder in silence for 10 minutes. "This is clean work," he said finally. "Most people bring me feelings. You brought me dates." He tapped the transfer log. "Here's my problem, though. What you've got proves your wife moved marital money into her sister's account, and that the note's likely forged. That's a fraud against you. What I need, what makes it a case against the Circle, what protects the 40 other families, is a recruitment pitch making a specific guaranteed rate of return. Somebody promising out loud in front of a witness who'll swear to it. I can't move on a vibe. I need her to say the number." "She'll say the number," I said. "She can't help it. The number is how she closes." Then here's what I'll tell you, and it's the only thing I can promise. He slid the folder back. If you can get me into a room where she makes that promise, on a date I can staff, I'll bring the division. But Wesley, I can't stage anything. You can't wear a wire, you can't bait her, none of that. You just get me in the door as a guest, and let her do what she does. If she does it, I've got her. If she doesn't, I've got nothing, and you're on your own with a lawyer and a long year. That was the deal, thin, legal, and entirely dependent on Bridget being exactly as arrogant as she'd been for 10 years. I've bet on worse things. I've bet on wire behind a wall being where the plan said it was. Some bets you can actually calculate. The setback came from the side I trusted. The night before the gala's original date, Denny called, and he'd been drinking. Just enough. I talked to a lawyer, he said, my own, and he told me the smart move, the only move, is to call the note now, sue on the guarantee, get in line first before the circle's got nothing left. A long breath. Wesley, your name's on that note as guarantor. My guy says if I call it, I go after you. Your business. Your house. He says I'd probably win. He says I'd be an idiot not to. The floor tilted, because he was right. In the small, cruel way lawyers are right. The fastest way for Denny to get his daughter's college money back was to pretend the forgery was real and collect from me. The forged note that could sink me was also, to a scared father, a life raft with my name printed on the side. Denny, I said, and I kept my voice level even though everything in me wanted to beg. If you call that note, you're collecting on a forgery. You'd know it's fake and you'd sue me on it anyway. That's not getting your money back. That's becoming her. Silence. I know you're scared, I said. I've got a kid too. But if you go that way, the circle wins even after it dies, because the only two men it played get to spend the next 3 years destroying each other in court while Bridget watches. Or, you stand in that room tomorrow with me, and you tell the truth, and we sink her together. And you go to the front of the line of real victims with the state on your side instead of against you. One of those roads gets your name clean. The other one just moves the knife. I heard him breathing. I genuinely did not know which way he'd go. And my whole family's floor was riding on the answer. Okay, he said finally, rough. Okay, together. I'm sorry, Wesley. It's just 60 grand. My kid. I know, I said. Be in the room. I hung up and sat very still because I'd just talked to the one man who could destroy me out of doing it. And I wasn't sure it would hold, and I had no way to make it hold except to trust that a father who leads with the kid is usually not the kind who takes from one. Here's where it almost came apart, and I need you to sit in the almost with me, because this is the night I thought I'd lost. 2 days before the gala, Denny called, and his voice was wrong. Bridget knows something's off, he said, fast, low. She moved the gala up. It's tomorrow, not Saturday. And Wesley, she cornered me tonight. Asked me straight if I'd talk to you. I don't think I hit it good. A breath. And she said if anybody comes after the circle, the first paper that surfaces is your guarantee. She said, and I quote, Wesley signed. Wesley's the one holding this, not me. She's going to hang it on you. Tomorrow. In front of everyone. Before you can say a word. I stood in my kitchen with the phone against my ear and the card table in front of me and the crayon banner still taped crooked over it. Forever. Forever. And I felt the floor I'd been so careful about tilt under my feet. The examiner's full written report wasn't finished. Holloway hadn't confirmed he could get anyone there on 1 day's notice. My lawyer was 2 counties away, and in 18 hours my sister-in-law was going to stand in a room full of my family and my mother and 40 strangers and produce a promissory note with my name in cursive at the bottom and tell them all that the careful man had signed for everything. The forger was going to accuse me of the forgery. And every person in that room already had the story pre-installed, courtesy of Colleen and Cora. Wesley the controller, Wesley who hides money, Wesley who's small. They wouldn't need much to believe the worst about me. They'd been practicing. I sat down at the wobbling table. I put my hands flat on it so they wouldn't shake. For 1 long minute, I was 12 years old again in a house with pale squares on the walls, and every careful thing I'd built felt like nothing, like a fence in a storm. Then I found the matchbook still wedged under the short leg where I'd left it, still holding, still level. And I picked up the phone and started making the calls that had to be made before morning. Vivian answered on the second ring at 11 at night because good fraud lawyers sleep with the phone on the pillow. I told her the gala had moved to tomorrow and that Bridget planned to name me as the guarantor in public. She was quiet for a second. Then she surprised me. "Good," she said. "Good. Wesley, you've been treating that forged note like your weakness. It's your weapon. She's about to introduce your own forgery in front of 40 witnesses and swear you signed it. Do you understand what that is? That's her, on the record, in public, standing behind a document a forensic examiner will prove she faked. Let her. Do not stop her. The worst thing that can happen to a forger is to be believed at the exact moment before the truth walks in." I heard her sit up. "Here's what you do. You don't accuse anyone on the way in. You let her hand you the rope, and you bring 3 things. The examiner's preliminary findings, which he emailed me at 6 a.m. after I begged, 2 pages, signed, enough. My printed exemplars, the real Wesley, block letters on a dozen honest documents, and the bank records, printed clean, showing 18 months of transfers from our house fund into abundance the same weeks my wife told me money was tight. Then I called Holloway. He didn't answer. I left a message with the new date, the address, the time, and 1 sentence. If the state wants a recruitment pitch with specific promises of return in front of witnesses, it's happening tomorrow at 7, and I'll be inside. Then I called Denny back and told him to do nothing, say nothing, and just be in the room. Whatever happens tomorrow, I said, don't defend me. Let it play. You'll know when. He said, how will I know? You'll know, I said, because for once, the careful guy is going to be the loudest thing in the room. I didn't sleep. I sat at the card table and I built the order of it, the way I build a panel. Every wire labeled, nothing energized until the whole thing is ready. No live copper in my hand before it's time. At 2 a.m, Cora came down for water and found me there. She stood in the doorway in the dark, and for a moment, I'll be honest with you, because I promised I would. For a moment, I almost told her. She looked soft in that light. She looked like the woman who'd picked an oak table with room to grow into. And some coward, hopeful part of me, my father's part, the part that wants the story to not be true, opened my mouth to say, Cora, I know. And it's not too late. Walk in with me tomorrow, and we'll burn it down together and save what's left. I hesitated. I sat there with the sentence in my mouth. Then she said, You're still up counting? God, Wesley. A little laugh, not unkind, which was worse. You know, Bridget asked if you were finally getting on board. I told her yes. Don't embarrass me tomorrow, okay? Just for one night, be someone people want to be around. And she took her water and went back up to bed. The sentence died in my mouth. I let it. You can't save someone who's already decided you're the problem. I closed my laptop. The hopeful part of me went quiet, and it has mostly stayed quiet since. I don't miss it as much as I thought I would. The morning of the gala, Lila found me at the card table with my 3 folders squared up in a row. Is today the counting day? She asked. She's 6. She thinks everything her dad does is counting, and she's not wrong. Today's a big counting day, I said. She studied the folders, then studied me. Are you scared? I almost gave her the dad answer. Then I remembered my mother, and I decided my daughter deserved a true thing from a careful man. A little, I said, but I did all my getting ready. When you do all your getting ready, being a little scared is okay. She nodded like that was the wisest thing she'd ever heard, and she reached up and pressed one finger on the top folder like she was giving it a blessing. Okay, you got it, Daddy. I looked at that small hand on the folder that held the thing that would save her future, and I thought, this is who I'm careful for. Not to be right. For her. The gala was in the banquet room of a hotel off the highway, the kind with a chandelier that's trying very hard. 40 women, a handful of husbands and guests brought to be turned into members, a bar, a slideshow. Bridget had a microphone and a headset like a woman selling a cause, balloons in gold. A banner, a real one, printed, expensive, that said Abundance Circle and under it, in script, Rise Together. I wore a jacket. I brought a folder. I kissed my wife's cheek at the door and told her she looked beautiful, which was true, and she squeezed my arm and said, See, this is nice, and walked me in like a trophy she'd finally polished. My mother was already there, Cora had invited her, of course. Eleanor sat near the front in her good blue cardigan, hands folded on her purse, playing the part of the lonely widow considering an opportunity. And when our eyes met, she gave me nothing at all, which is how I knew she was ready. Colleen was there, front table, beaming. Denny stood at the back near the bar, nursing a soda, not looking at me. And Bridget worked the room like weather, warm and everywhere, touching shoulders. And when she saw me, she came over with both hands out and said, loud enough for the nearby tables, "The careful man himself. Ladies, this is Wesley, Cora's husband. If Wesley's here, you know it's solid." A wink. "He reads the fine print." The tables laughed, admiring, and I understood she'd just done it again, in public, on purpose. Used my caution as her collateral, one more time, right to my face. I smiled. I said, "I really do read the fine print, Bridget." And I went and sat down next to my mother, and I put my folder on the table, and I waited for my sister-in-law to pick up her microphone and hand the whole room a rope. The pitch was a machine, and I'll give the machine its due. It was built well. Bridget didn't say pyramid. She said community. She didn't say your money pays the people above you. She said we pool our abundance and it multiplies. She stood under her gold banner and told 40 women that banks were built to keep them small, that the men in their lives, a glance, warm toward the husbands, toward me, meant well but thought small, and that the circle was the first place that had ever told a woman her instincts were an asset instead of a liability. It was good. It was aimed exactly at the softest place in every person there. I watched Colleen nod like church. I watched a young woman 2 tables over, a guest, someone's daughter-in-law, lean forward with her whole hopeful body. The slideshow ran behind Bridget while she talked. Beaches, a woman on a boat, a graduation cap, a set of house keys held up in the sun. No dollar figures on the screen, just the life. That's the trick I finally understood watching it. She never showed them the money, because money can be checked. She showed them the version of themselves that had the money, and you can't fact-check a feeling. And I sat there running my own quiet countdown, because I had exactly one thing to confirm before any of my careful work meant anything. I told Holloway she'd say the number. I'd bet everything on it. But watching her work the warm end of the pitch, all sisterhood, all mindset, never a figure, a cold thread of doubt went up my spine. What if tonight, of all nights, with a stranger in the back she didn't recognize, my sister-in-law finally got careful? I scanned the room without moving my head. Denny at the bar, soda, eyes down. My mother in her blue cardigan, hands folded, patient as a stone. And near the door, a man in a gray jacket I'd never seen, holding a drink he wasn't drinking, watching the stage with the flat attention of a person who does this for a living. Holloway had made it. He'd gotten my message, and he'd come, and he was standing exactly where a witness needs to stand. Everything now depended on Bridget being Bridget for 60 more seconds. She didn't disappoint me. They never do. Pride is the most reliable thing about the proud. Then Bridget got specific, because a pitch has to get specific to close, and specific is what Holloway had told me the state needed. Level 1 gives you back triple in 90 days, Bridget said into the microphone, on the record in front of 40 witnesses. I've paid out every woman who's trusted the circle, every single one. She spread her arms. This isn't a bet. Careful men bet. We don't bet, ladies. We build. Triple in 90 days, guaranteed, every single one paid. I felt my mother go very still beside me. I didn't move. There was no report finished enough, no investigator confirmed in the room, no signal that my careful plan had survived the day being ripped up and moved. For all I knew, I was about to stand alone. And then Bridget said the sentence that started it. She lifted a folder of her own off the podium, and she smiled at me across the room, and she said, "In fact, some of you have asked if the circle is protected, if it's real. Let me show you what a serious guarantee looks like. This one's backed personally by a man in this very room." She opened her folder, and I opened mine. Bridget held the note up so the front tables could see it. The looping W, my name, dressed in a stranger's hand. "This is a personal guarantee," she said, "signed by Wesley, a licensed contractor. A careful man, he put his name behind this circle because he looked at it and he believed." She turned to me, gracious, generous, a queen bestowing. "Wesley, do you want to say a word about why you signed?" The room turned to me. 40 faces, my wife glowing at the next table, my mother's hands folded on her purse. I stood up, slowly. I've learned that slow reads as calm, and calm reads as true. I'd love to, I said, but I can't tell you why I signed it, Bridget, because I never did. A ripple, small, the kind before the big one. Wesley, Cora's voice low, a warning laugh built into it. Don't. I didn't look at her. I looked at the room, and I kept my voice level, the way you keep your hand steady near live copper. I've never signed my name in cursive in my life. Ask anyone who's ever had me pull a permit. I print. I've printed since I was 8 years old. I lifted the first page from my folder. This is a preliminary report from a forensic document examiner, 30 years with the state crime lab before he retired. He compared that signature Bridget is holding to 12 documents I actually signed. I set it on the table where the front row could see. His finding is that the signature on that note is not mine, and, his words, was produced by a writer imitating a hand they did not understand, cursive, from a man who doesn't own a cursive signature. Bridget's smile held, barely. Handwriting people say what they're paid to say. Maybe. I lifted the second page, but handwriting people don't fake this. I laid down my exemplars, a fan of documents, my real name in honest block letters, a dozen times over, unmistakable. That's me, every time, for 15 years. You're holding the one signature of mine that exists in cursive, Bridget, and you're the one who brought it into this room. A woman at the front table, I didn't know her, leaned over and looked, actually looked, from the note in Bridget's hand to the fan of block letters on my table. You could watch it land on her face. She sat back like she'd touched something hot. Bridget recovered fast because she always recovered fast. This is exactly the kind of technicality a controlling man hides behind, she said, bright to the room. Handwriting, cursive, print, who cares? He's trying to distract you from the fact that he's tearing his own family apart over jealousy. Then read his examiner's line yourself, I said, and I slid the report to the woman who'd leaned in. Out loud, I want them to hear it in a voice that isn't mine. She picked it up. Her hands weren't steady. She read, "The questioned signature was produced by a writer imitating a hand they did not understand. Cursive form, executed by someone unfamiliar with the subject's actual writing habits, with pen pressure consistent with deliberate, careful tracing." She looked up. Deliberate, careful, tracing. Somebody's fork touched a plate, and the sound went through the room like a shot. That was the thing Bridget couldn't out-talk, not a feeling, a finding. She'd built her whole empire on the power to make people doubt what was in front of them. You're being paranoid. Who cares about handwriting? It's a technicality. And for 10 years it had worked, because doubt is cheap and hope is loud. But you cannot gaslight a document. The paper just says what it says, in a voice that never wavers, no matter how warm you smile. Silence started at the front and moved back like a draft. Bridget set the note down. Fast. Too fast. The Queen recalculating. "Well," she said, brightening, pivoting, "there's obviously a mix-up. Cora, did you—" And there it was. She'd reached for the nearest body to put it on instinct. And the nearest body was my wife. Cora stood up. Her face had gone a color I'd never seen on it. "I don't know what he's talking about," she said to the room. Too loud. This is exactly what he does. He controls everything. He hides money. He moved our daughter's college fund where I couldn't touch it. Ask him. He's paranoid, and he's trying to embarrass my sister because he can't stand—" "Cora!" I said her name gently, and it stopped her because I hadn't raised my voice once and she'd expected a fight to swing at. "I did move Lila's college fund somewhere safe. That's the one true thing you've said tonight. I moved it because the rest of our savings was already gone." I opened the folder to the last pages. These are our bank records. I laid them down one after another, a paper trail 18 months long. Every month for a year and a half, money left our house fund. The same week, every single month that you told me money was tight. It didn't go to the furnace, or brakes, or groceries. It went here. I put my finger on a line and I read the word out loud so the whole room heard it in my voice. Abundance. $81,000 out of my daughter's future into this. The draft became a room holding its breath. Colleen was on her feet now at the front table. "Cora?" Her voice cracked on her own daughter's name. "You told me. You said Wesley wouldn't let you put in more. You said he was keeping you small." She looked at the note, at Bridget, at the gold banner. "You said he was the reason." "Mom," Cora started. "How much did you take from me?" Colleen wasn't asking Cora. She turned to Bridget. "I gave you my pension, Bridget. You told me my son-in-law had signed. You showed me that paper. You said if Wesley's in, it's solid." And that was the crack in the machine. Because Bridget had told everyone the same lie, and now the lie was standing up at different tables comparing notes. Bridget grabbed the microphone. The professional warmth was gone. Underneath it was something harder and older. "Everybody needs to calm down. This is a family dispute. Wesley is having a breakdown. Look at him. He's obsessed. He's been building a case against his own wife. What kind of man does that?" "The kind who found the fraud," said a voice from the back. "Denny." He'd set his soda down. He walked forward and every head turned, and he stood in the middle of the room with those big hands open at his sides like a man surrendering something. "My name's Denny. Most of you don't know me. Bridget knows me. In January, I wired this circle $60,000, my daughter's college money, because Bridget showed me a note and told me a careful contractor named Wesley had personally guaranteed it." He looked around the room slowly. "I was promised triple in 90 days. It's been 6 months. You want to know how much the circle has paid me back?" Nobody breathed. "Nothing," Denny said. "Not $1. She keeps telling me the payout's coming. Same thing she just told all of you tonight. Triple in 90 days, every woman paid." His voice shook and he let it. "Raise your hand if you've actually been paid what she promised. Go ahead. Anybody. Raise your hand." 40 women. Not one hand. The young daughter-in-law, 2 tables over, the hopeful one, put her hand over her mouth. "That's the whole thing," Denny said quietly. "That's how it works. The first few in get paid with the money the rest of you just handed over tonight. And when there's nobody left to bring in, it's whoever's holding the last chair who loses everything." She used a forged signature to make me feel safe. She used all of you to pay herself. And she was about to point the whole collapse at a man who never signed a thing. The room didn't erupt. That's not how it happened. It turned, one woman at a time, like lights going out down a street. A woman near the front stood first. 50s, kind face, a name tag that said Peg. The success story. The one Bridget had bragged about at the circle night. The one who doubled her money and left the job that treated her like furniture. "I'm Peg," she said, and her voice wobbled. "Bridget uses my name a lot, so I want to say it myself. I got paid once. Early, $4,000, and it felt like magic, and then she asked me to bring in 3 friends so the blessing could grow." She pressed her lips together. "I brought my sister, my hairdresser, a woman from my church. I have not been paid since. And tonight I brought a 4th. She turned and looked at the young daughter-in-law 2 tables over, and her face just crumpled. "Honey, I'm so sorry. I brought you here to sign." The young woman stood up on shaking legs. She couldn't have been 25. "I brought my mother-in-law's deposit," she whispered to the whole silent room. "It's in my purse, in cash." She trusted me because Peg trusted Bridget because Wesley signed. Her hand went to her mouth again. "None of it was real. It was just us. It was always just us, wasn't it?" That's the sentence that finished it. It was always just us. 40 women in that second, all doing the same math at the same time. The math I'd done alone at a card table 3 weeks earlier. And arriving together at the bottom of the pyramid where they'd been standing the whole time. An older woman started to cry, quietly, without drama, the worst kind. 2 tables comforted their own. Somebody said, "I put in my tax refund." Somebody else said a number out loud and then covered her face for having said it. And Colleen, who'd let herself into my garage a week ago to tell me I made her daughter feel small, turned all the way around in her chair and looked at me across that whole ruined room. She didn't apologize. She's not built for it. But she gave me one small nod. The nod of a woman conceding the one thing she'd sworn she never would, that the careful man had been the only one in the family telling the truth. Bridget's mouth opened, and here's where she hung herself, because people like Bridget cannot stand in a losing room without reaching for the thing that has always worked: contempt. "You're all so soft," she snapped into the microphone to a room full of women she'd called sisters an hour ago. "You want to be rich, but you flinch at the first hard part. I did what nobody in this family had the spine to do. I built something. And yes, Yes, I put Wesley's name on the paper because somebody in this family had to have the guts to move, and he was too busy counting pennies to ever say yes. Oh, it's suddenly been a months wait. She stopped. She'd heard it a half second too late. 40 witnesses had heard it too. Yes, I put Wesley's name on the paper. The confession walked out of her own mouth, in her own voice, wearing her own pride, exactly the way my father's ruin had once walked out of a can't-miss deal. Careful men stay poor, she'd said, but it wasn't the careful man who just told a room full of people he was a fraud. It was her. It was always going to be her. All I'd done was stand still and let her be loud. The silence after that was the loudest thing I've ever heard. And then a man near the door stepped forward, and he wasn't nursing a drink, and he wasn't anybody's guest. He held up a card. "Bridget, I'm Investigator Holloway with the State Securities Division." Calm, unhurried. "I've been in the back for the last 40 minutes. That was a very thorough pitch." He looked around the room, gentle now to the 40 frightened faces. "Ladies, nobody here is in trouble. If you brought money tonight, don't hand it over and please stay. We're going to need to talk to each of you, and there are people who can help you recover what you can." Back to Bridget. "We've had complaints about the Circle from 2 other towns, promising a specific rate of return you can't pay, using new members' money to pay old ones. That has a name, and it isn't abundance. And a forged financial instrument is a separate felony all by itself." Bridget looked at the microphone in her hand like she didn't know how it got there. Cora sat down, just sat down slowly in the middle of the room next to an empty chair and put her face in her hands. And then she looked up, and she found me across all those tables. And for the first time in 18 months, my wife looked at me without a story in her eyes. No paranoid, no controlling, no hand flat on my chest, calming the horse. Just Cora, 32, the woman who'd picked an oak table with room to grow into, understanding all at once that the careful man she'd spent a year making small had been the wall between our daughter and the floor the entire time. "Wesley," she said, barely a sound. "I was going to make it back. I was going to put it all back before you ever—" "I know," I said. And I did know. That was the worst part. She hadn't set out to ruin us. She'd set out to be, for once, the one who won big, and she'd have burned every safe thing we had to feel it, and told herself it was for Lila the whole way down. My father had a version of that same speech. He only ever wanted to give us more. I didn't say any of that. There was nothing to win by saying it. I just held her eyes for a moment, and then I let them go the way you let go of something you've already grieved. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that, because the movies lie to you about this moment. I felt like a man who'd finally gotten the fire out and was standing in the wet, smoking wreck of a house, counting who made it. My mother, my daughter, asleep at home, safe, her future in an account no one could reach. Denny, who'd get his day. Colleen, who'd lost her pension and her illusions in the same hour. And Cora at the center of it, the woman I'd married, the mother of my child, hearing her own sister say her name and my name in the same breath as felony. If you've made it this far and there's a person in your life who ever handed you a word like paranoid to make you stop trusting your own eyes, I hope tonight is the night you pick your eyes back up. That's all I'll say. You already know if this is for you. Because being careful was never the flaw they told me it was. It was just love, keeping watch, doing the math while everyone else laughed. The Circle folded that week. It had to. The only thing holding it up was the belief that the money was real. And once 40 women stopped believing at the same time, there was nothing underneath. Bridget was charged. Not just for the scheme, the state was already circling that, but for the forgery, which she'd confessed to in front of 40 witnesses and an investigator. My lawyer filed an affidavit of forgery. The examiner's full report came in exactly as he'd promised, and the note with my name on it died on paper. Denny got in line with the other real victims. He won't get all of it back. He'll get his day and his name off the hook. And I made sure the state knew he'd been the one to walk into that room and tell the truth when it cost him. Colleen doesn't have her pension. She has a daughter facing charges and a son-in-law she spent a month calling controlling. She hasn't apologized. I didn't expect her to, but she called me last week, and she didn't let herself in with the key. She knocked, and she asked if she could see Lila. I said yes. Boundaries aren't about punishment. They're about who gets to knock. Cora and I are done. I want to tell you that part carefully because I don't hate her, and I need you to understand that isn't weakness. She didn't forge the note herself. Bridget did that. But she drained our daughter's future for 18 months, and she stood in a room and called me, paranoid and controlling, to cover it. And when it fell apart, she reached for me to break my fall for her one more time. There was a moment near the end when she looked at me across that banquet room, and I saw something real move through her face. Not a plan, just a person understanding what she'd done. I think that was true. I think she loved me and did this anyway because her sister offered her a version of herself that felt bigger than the careful life we'd built, and she chose it over and over on a schedule. I filed. We share Lila. I'll never keep a girl from her mother, but the accounts are mine now. The careful walls rebuilt higher, and my daughter's college money sits where the next sure thing can't ever reach it. I kept the card table. I could afford a real one again by now. Instead, I fixed the one we sold, tracked down the man with the pickup, bought our oak table back for the same $200, and carried it in through the same door. It sits in the same spot, over the pale square that's finally darkening again from us being here. But the wobbly card table, I kept it too. It's in the garage where I do the books. And under the short leg, there's still a matchbook, folded, holding it level. I look at it sometimes when the numbers are hard. My father bet the house to be a hero and lost us the walls. I leveled a leg and kept the roof. Lila's banner is still up. Daddy, Mommy, me, forever in crayon with a dog we still don't own. I haven't taken it down. Someday I'll have to explain to her that forever changed shape. Not tonight. Tonight she's asleep upstairs in a house nobody can take, her future locked in a drawer no one can pick, and her father is downstairs at an oak table, counting, the way he always has, the way he always will. They called it paranoid. My mother called it love that showed up early and did the math. I know now which one it was.